Hey, I'm Stephanie, and today we're talking about makeup from Salt, New York with swatches and application footage, so if you're just here for that, feel free to use the timestamps to skip ahead. But before we begin, I thought I would set the stage by sharing some thoughts that have been going through my head recently, because I'll think they'll add some richer context to the review. In general, I think it's really hard for many of us to make friends with the idea of aging, especially when it comes to makeup, because we're told, gently and not so gently, that aging means less elasticity, less glow, less beauty, which isn't true, by the way, because if beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then we can define what beautiful means. And I would argue that yes, although smooth skin is beautiful, I think my grandmother got more beautiful the older she got and the more I could see her smile lines. But a lot of the conversations in society don't go in that direction, and many of the products made specifically for aging skin frame it as a crisis, as if we're supposed to be fighting with our own cheekbones before they betray us. So when a product starts working better for me as I get older, it kind of short-circuits my brain. I've always liked cream cosmetics. I love the textures, the ease, the way they melt into and move with the skin so easily. So a few years ago, I decided I would buy some color cosmetics from Salt, New York to try, a blush and a couple of bronzers, and unfortunately they just didn't really work for me, and that made me a little sad because the brand generally seemed so thoughtful. Not only did they create beautiful makeup, but they also had a truly eco-friendly packaging concept and really straightforward, honest marketing, which is not easy to find in the beauty space. But although the blush and bronzer I tried from them years ago looked great upon initial application, they almost instantly disappeared on me. And I don't think that was the product's fault, I think it just didn't work with my skin type. But then my skin changed. I didn't get Botox or some miracle chemical peel, it was perimenopause altering my skin. So when Salt New York offered to send me some products to try, I thought, what the heck, I might as well. My skin's different now, so maybe it'll work. And it did. The blush stayed put, so I tried the skin tint, and it blended in like it had always been meant to be there. And the color corrector and concealer also brightened and made my face look more alive without slipping around. I wasn't expecting this. I thought that aging meant I would have to give up things, not gain access to things that hadn't worked for me before. So today, I want to walk through these products, but also talk through this feeling, this very strange, very lovely surprise that aging, in all its weirdness, sometimes can give us more. So let's talk about what changed. It wasn't the product, it was me. I'm in perimenopause, and for those of you who haven't had the pleasure, it's basically like your body trying to break up with you without actually moving out. My skin used to be normal to dry with just a touch of rosacea. Now, I'm really oily in the T-zone, but with random dry patches, I'm acne prone and now way more inflamed. Basically, it's like my skin is doing a little bit of everything all at once, kind of like a hormonal jazz ensemble. And I think that's why Salt New York suddenly works. Back when my skin was drier, it almost felt like my skin would just suck up all the moisture from the product, kind of like a desert ground after rain, and that's why the pigment would just fade almost immediately. But now that my skin's all over the place and I have more oils there, it's almost like the product melds with my skin instead of like getting soaked into it, and so the products wear much longer. I didn't expect that. Honestly, most of the time it feels like perimenopause is absolutely ruining my life. So to have one small thing actually get better felt kind of like finding gold at the bottom of the compost bin. But before we talk more about aging, let's dive into the products. We'll start with the Sneaky Balm, Salt New York's sheer skin tint. So if you are looking for a full coverage foundation, you will hate this. Also, if you're looking for a base product that's going to wear flawlessly through a long night of dancing, this also is not the one for you. But if you're looking for something that's going to soften reality a little bit while adding some radiance, then this might be a great option. It doesn't blur pores or flatten your face, it's not magic, but it does kind of disappear into the skin or fade into the background in a way that just makes you look maybe like you slept enough and drank enough water, and maybe like your hormones aren't using your forehead as a battleground, maybe they're just using it as a picnic area today instead. Now I do powder it down, especially in the center of my face, because otherwise it's too dewy for my now oily skin. But the finish underneath is radiant, not greasy, and I feel like the combination of the Sneaky Balm plus any of my favorite powders gives me a flattering satin finish. Now, if I want to look more matte, I can use a pore filling primer. I have the Tarte Timeless Smoothing setting primer. Then I don't have to powder it down at all, but that comes with a trade-off. The Sneaky Balm no longer blends as seamlessly into my skin when I use the Tarte primer, so I only tend to use that option when it's really hot outside. I've found that the best way to use it is to scrape some out onto a palette and then press the product into my brush, then press it into my face. This not only gives me an even application that looks very natural, but it also keeps the creams fresh because I don't dip my brush directly into them. That's just a personal pet peeve though. I've seen lots of people use these by going directly in with a brush. Just as Salt New York very openly claims on their website, this is a medium lasting product. So if I'm looking for something that's going to give me 8 to 12 hours of flawless wear, this is the wrong product for that. However, if I'm going to go grocery shopping or meet a friend for coffee, this is great because the sheer coverage plus the naturally radiant finish is a very casual look. I find that if I wear a more full coverage foundation, the flawless finish can look a little bit overdressed. So I think of the Sneaky Balm as the comfy outfit of my base products. Because humans my age often have things like spots and capillaries and redness, and if I completely erase all of those things with a more full coverage base product, it can feel a little bit off if I'm trying to go casual, kind of like I'm wearing a ball gown to pick up a pizza. The Sneaky Balm offers very light coverage in a way that feels natural for me, so the sunspots and the capillaries are still there, but they're no longer the star of the show. I guess I could put it this way: the imperfections are still visible enough to lend some authenticity to my face, but they fade into the scenery enough to let my features pop more. I am so thankful that Salt New York offered to send me different shades of their complexion products because I initially chose the wrong one. So if you suspect that you and I are skin twins, I will leave my foundation shades in the show notes to give you a better idea of what shades might work for you. It's now summer, and the shade that works best for me is N11. I haven't had a lot of time to get to the lake, so I'm not at my darkest, but I suspect that N10 would work for me at the end of an outdoorsy summer, especially because this product is so sheer. And Salt New York just sent me shade N12, which I suspect is my best winter shade, although when I used N11 this past spring, I could make it work due to the sheerness. So if I could only choose one shade for the whole year, I think N11 would be my selection. Salt New York also makes this formula in a few color correcting shades, and they sent me the green one, which is great for my redness. Right now, it's living in my monthly makeup bag so I can test it against my current favorite green corrector. If you want to hear the full comparison, leave me a little leaf emoji so you'll be included in the great green off. For now, my early thoughts are that I like it, especially as a primer under some of my other more full coverage foundations. Next up is the Best Case Concealer. My first experience with this was in the shade Peach, which is a great color correcting shade for me. Now, I was a little nervous that it might be as sheer as the Sneaky Balm, or that it might look a little heavy on my ever crepier looking skin under my eyes because it is a cream and not a liquid. But none of my fears came to pass. It does have more coverage than the Sneaky Balm, enough to brighten under the eyes without making me look like I'm trying to fake 8 hours of sleep with industrial grade paint. And it's lightweight enough that it doesn't weigh the thin skin down. If I don't set it, it will crease in my fine lines, but that's just a reality with all concealers for me these days, so I think that's just the nature of the beast. It's definitely luminous, a bit more radiant than I typically go for under the eyes, but it's not slipping or sliding anywhere. And if I powder it just a little, just enough to tamp down the glow, it looks alive without looking shiny. It layers beautifully over the Sneaky Balm to give me a little more coverage in certain areas like the sides of my nose or the center of my forehead. So if you're someone who likes to build your coverage, or if you want to spot conceal rather than go in with a full layer of foundation, the Best Case Concealer has been giving me that flexibility. Now for the part that really surprised me, because I had never tried the base products before, so I didn't really know what to expect, but I had tried the color cosmetics, the blushes, and they did not work for me. I would swipe them on, pat them in, feel so cute for like 5 minutes, and then they would just completely vanish. I mean, be 100% gone. But now they stick around. I tested the shade Sunburn on a 6-hour wear day where I only wore Salt New York products and then the blush on top. So no setting spray and no powder. And it did fade a little bit over the course of the 6 hours, just like most cream cosmetics would, but it didn't disappear. It still looked lovely at the end of the test. And that's a huge change from my first experience with the blushes. They still blend out just as easily as when I tried them several years ago, except now they stick around. And the finish is still exactly what I want. It's dewy, almost glossy. The blush never entirely sets down on my face, but it's not tacky enough for my hair to stick to it on a windy day, so it does set down enough for my taste. Although, to be fair, I usually tend to set products because that's just the way my makeup routine is. They're not dramatic, they're not sculpting, they're more like adding some watercolor to your cheeks, which actually reminds me a little bit of the Makeup Forever cream blush formula. So if you've ever had a product just completely disappear on you and you were wondering, is this my fault or the product's fault? It can go either way. Sometimes a product can be great and just not work with our body chemistry. And sometimes we can counteract that by using different application techniques that make it compatible with us. But sometimes it's just not for us. And the blushes from Salt New York, as beautiful as they just weren't for me a few years ago. And now that my body chemistry is changing, they are for me. So that's just a reminder that not everything is made for us. Now, Salt New York was kind enough to send me 5 different shades of their blushes, and all of them worked equally well for me, although I did have some shade favorites. Now, first of all, they made a shade called Mood Lighting in 3 different depths. So they have Mood Lighting Light, Mood Lighting Medium, and Mood Lighting Deep. They sent me light and medium. And out of these 2, light suits me better, and so I enjoy that more, but I do think that medium also works for me. So those are both very nice. And these have a little bit of shimmer running through them, which does look great. Although I have found that for my personal preferences, I like to wear these particular blushes without setting them because then the tiny shimmer particles in them look more natural on my skin. I find that if I set these with a powder, that the shimmer particles stand out a little bit more and look a little bit less natural. But the other blushes do not have sparkle in them. They are simply straight blushes. And my favorite shade out of the ones that I received is Sunburnt, which is actually a surprise to me because it's quite vivid. I normally go for very nude blushes, but this one does give me an extraordinarily natural sunburnt look. And these blushes that don't have shimmer in them, I like to wear them on their own, but I also like to set them. And I feel like when I wear them without setting them, they give me a very almost glass skin look on my cheeks. And when I do set them, it's a beautiful satin finish. Now, the Salt New York blushes are technically called the lip and cheek refills. So do they actually work on the lips too? I'm wearing the shade Sunburned on my cheeks and my lips in this video, and I do think it looks lovely. It sits comfortably on my lip skin and it doesn't cling to texture there, but it also doesn't seem to have much staying power on the lips. That's not unusual for multi-use products. They technically can go anywhere, but in practice, they almost always have one area where they really shine. The bronzer formula feels just a touch drier than the blushes, and it's not quite as radiant, but it still has a luminous finish without any sparkle. Like the blushes, you can keep it sheer or build it up a decent amount without much effort. I have the shades Light Medium, which works well as a bronzer on me, and Taupe, which works as a contour. Both perform nicely, but I personally prefer the bronzer over the contour shade. That's partly because I already have other contours that suit my skin tone a bit better, but also because this slightly radiant finish isn't my favorite for contouring. That's not a deal breaker. I can powder it down to a satin finish, but it is worth noting if you prefer your contour completely matte. Knowing what I know now, would I spend my own money on these? My favorite formulas are definitely the Sneaky Balm and the Best Case Concealer, especially the Peach Corrector shade, and those are products I'd seriously consider buying myself in the future. The blushes and bronzers are really lovely, especially Mood Lighting Light and Sunburnt, but I'm not sure I'd repurchase them, mostly because they never completely set down. I tend to prefer creams that lock in just a little more than these do. So here's the thing, the brand didn't reformulate, they didn't create a for mature skin version. I was the factor that changed, and that's what made all the difference. Which I guess maybe is one of the more generous things that aging has handed me recently. A second chance to learn something that I didn't get to the first time. I don't know, I guess this just made me think aging is strange. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just odd. Things change, and some of those changes are hard, but every once in a while, one of those changes makes things easier, or better, or things just finally fit. If you've had one of those moments with makeup or anything else, I'd love to hear, because I'm just at the very beginning of this aging aging journey, and I know it. So I think the more we can talk about how we really feel about aging, and I mean not in a performative way, but in a really brutally honest way, the easier it is for all of us. So yeah, this was not the review I expected to make, but it also wasn't the skin I expected to have. And there is something comforting about knowing that some things really do get better with age, even if my jowls are starting to move independently from the rest of my face. A huge thanks goes to Salt New York for sending these my way so I could give them a second chance. But an even bigger thanks goes to you for being here, especially to my channel members and patrons, including my lovely Adagio angels, for making content like this possible. If you enjoyed this review, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out this video here if you'd like to explore beauty from a slower, more curious perspective. And I hope we can all remember that even stumbling can be a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.